The Suez Canal Crisis, written by K. Natwar Singh. On 7th July 1957, I flew to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, the world of Chengiz and Kubla. I was excited to visit this remote country, a vast landmass juxtaposed between Russia and China, where 1 million people lived. The Gobi Desert was below us, forbidding treeless. I was surprised to see patches of water in it. After nearly 2 hours, the clouds parted, the mist disappeared, and out popped Ulaanbaatar. It looked green and beautiful like the meadows of England. There was no runway. The airfield was full of grazing cattle, and the pilot had to bring the plane down very low to scare them away. We landed on the second attempt. It was cold and windy. We were received by a gentleman who later turned out to be the Czech ambassador. I felt sorry for him. First, he had been posted to Afghanistan and now Mongolia. The Chinese ambassador to Mongolia arrived in the afternoon. It was so cold that even with my overcoat on, I was shivering. The ambassador thought this undignified. He had a young Mongolian interpreter who had learnt Hindi in Moscow. The foreign minister held a reception for us at the foreign office. It was a big room with heavy furniture, obviously brought in from Moscow. He spoke French and Russian. Few Mongolians knew Chinese. In Mongolia, one got a pleasant feeling of unreality. The 15th century rubbed shoulders with the 20th century. One saw horses all over the place. On them, the Mongols had conquered half the existing world. They built an empire but neglected to build a nation. Around this time, the Suez Canal issue was gathering momentum. A strongly worded statement was issued on Independence Day. It read, "The Egyptian people built the Suez Canal on their own territory with their own blood. All international treaties concerning Suez Canal cannot but recognize that the Suez Canal is an integral part of Egypt and that the Suez Canal Company is an Egyptian company." The Asian and African countries had declared at the Bandung Conference that colonialism in all its manifestations was an evil which should speedily be brought to an end. During the Suez Crisis in 1956, tens of thousands of young Chinese assembled outside the British embassy. Some carried megaphones, others life-size placards with irreverent cartoons of John Bull and Anthony Eden. The slogans were standard: "Down with British imperialism," "Down with French imperialism," "Down with America," "Down with Israel," enemy of the brave Arab people. The protesters were mostly students. I watched these noisy scenes from the other side of the road. Photographs were plenty and so were the newsreel teams. The newspapers were full of the developments in Egypt. Egypt had opened an embassy in China only a few weeks earlier. The Egyptian ambassador had even received by Chairman Mao. Jawaharlal Nehru's statement condemning the invasion of Egypt by Britain, France, and Israel were lauded by the leadership. The demonstrations continued for several days and nights. No attempt was made by them to enter the British embassy. The frenzy was orchestrated. Close on the heels of the Suez Canal crisis came the news of the Soviet invasion of Hungary. Mao fully supported the Soviet invasion. The Prime Minister's refusal to place Hungary at par with Suez Canal created an outrage in India. Jayaprakash Narayan wrote, "If you, means Nehru, do not speak out, you will be held guilty of abetting enslavement of a brave people by a new imperialism more dangerous than the old because it masquerades as revolutionary." Krishna Menon made matters worse by stating in the Security Council that events in Hungary were a domestic affair. He went further. On his own, he abstained from voting on a resolution condemning the Soviet Union for the use of force, justifying his actions with an abrasive speech. The Prime Minister stood by Krishna Menon to the chagrin even of senior officials of the Ministry of External Affairs. Jawaharlal Nehru did himself no good by defending the indefensible. Thank you for listening. Now some of the words used in the above passage and their meaning. Around this time, the Suez Canal crisis was gathering momentum. Gathering momentum means to become gradually stronger or more successful. On 7th July 1957, I flew to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, a vast landmass juxtaposed between Russia and China. Juxtapose means to put things next to each other, especially in order to compare them. Jayaprakash Narayan wrote, "If you, means Nehru, do not speak out, you will be held guilty of abetting enslavement of a brave people by a new imperialism more dangerous than the old because it masquerades as revolutionary." Masquerade means to pretend. On his own, he abstained from voting on a resolution condemning the Soviet Union for the use of force, justifying his action with an abrasive speech. Abrasive means rude and unfriendly. The Prime Minister stood by Krishna Menon to the chagrin even of senior officials of the Ministry of External Affairs. Chagrin means disappointment or anger. Jawaharlal Nehru did himself no good by defending the indefensible. Indefensible means too bad to protect from criticism. Thank you very much.